Hi guys, thank you for watching this video tutorial. I'm going to do rather than do it in piecemeal where I've done like a series of videos how to create your test environment, I'm going to do this in one fell swoop so you don't have to keep on jumping from video to video, and hopefully at the end of this you will know how to set up your own test environment. As I said, this is predominantly for my customers when they need to test certain parts of an application. Maybe they've gone up to a different version, or they're testing something new within a service pack before they deploy it into production. So the operative word is test. This is only for a test environment and just to sort of get you set up for testing purposes. By no means am I sort of promoting this as a production environment. As I say, it's all down to your own personal configurations about how you want to configure that. But first of all, I'm going to show you how to create that virtual machine in Microsoft Azure. And then when we've got that virtual machine created, we will then need to do some configuration at the portal level, so within the actual Azure console. And then once that's configured, we can then go into the actual machine itself and complete the configurations to make that a domain controller. Once that's completed, we can then add another virtual machine and add it to the domain. So that's the purpose of this demonstration, and I'd like to do that in one fell swoop. I will pause in parts, so when it's deploying out a machine, it takes typically anywhere between 3 and 5 minutes. But as I said, rather than wait for that, I will pause it, and then when it's fully loaded, we can go into the next step. So first of all, you can see the Microsoft Azure portal on the screen, and as you can see, there's a load of things you can actually do within Azure. Very powerful, fantastic service. But the purpose of my demonstration is to show you how to create that test environment and keep it nice and low in cost, so it's not an expensive resource to utilize. So the first thing we need to do is we need to create a virtual machine. So in the left hand frame, we can click on virtual machines. You'll have a list of all of your virtual machines that you've created. For this particular one, I'm going to click on add. And then when I click on add, it's going to create the wizard that I go through step by step. So first of all, you've obviously got your subscription there. If you are joining Azure for the first time, then they give you a kind of 30-day, £150 credit, so you can actually test that out in the early stages before committing to parting with any cash. So nice little, as I say, introduction into the Azure environment. Next thing to do is create a resource group. So when you're creating your domain, I kind of encourage to keep it within the same resource group, and then from an organizational point of view and for reporting on billing and costing, you can see what it actually costs to run that particular service. So I'm going to create a new resource group for this, and I'm going to call it my test, just so we know that everything is going into my test. Give the virtual machine a name. We will call it my DC, so it's my domain name. And the region, the most cost-effective region at this moment in time for myself, locally to me, is North Europe. So I could choose one of the UK servers, or North Europe or West Europe. But I did find at the particular time when I was testing it, not all of the machine sizes were available for me within my region, and so I stayed with stayed within the Europe servers. So looking at these, there are some more cost-effective ones in the US, but if I want something local to me, then the choice of Europe, I've got 4 there, but North Europe is the most cost-effective one. Availability options, I'm not going to have high availability, so if I wanted, for example, if I wanted to have a backup for my domain controller, or I was running another SQL server and one of those was going to go down, then I could actually configure this so I could have a high availability option to fail over if Microsoft were taking that particular service down for routine maintenance, etc. It would obviously take into account that there's 2 in that particular area and only take down the one, so we keep the availability going. First thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to select an image. So there's a number of sort of choice ones there by default, but then we can click on the link below, and what that will do is it will browse the marketplace, and it will give us a whole more host of services that we can choose from. So from these particular images that I want to select, the default ones, if I was going to pick 2012 server or 2016 server, they come with 128 gigabytes of disk space, so it is really overkill. You know, I think it's about 12 to 15 gig is a 2012-2016 server, so it's not using a load of space, so there's a lot of wasted space, and of course you're paying for that. So really, for a testing environment, I find that the small disk, so when you are browsing the marketplace and you see these Microsoft images with small disk at the front, then these are only running a 30 gig disk drive, so a lot smaller, a lot easier to manage, and of course a lot cheaper. So I'm going to choose 2016 for this. So I've selected that, and the next thing now is to do with the sizing. So the sizing guide, if I click on change size, it's going to show you a list of various VMs that we can choose, sort of the cores on there, the size of the RAM, etc, etc. Now I typically go between two of them. I usually have the B2S, which isn't too bad at £30 a month, or the B1S, which is £8.48. These prices do fluctuate, but as I say, they're usually more than adequate for my test environment. And I'm going to select this one. So when setting up, as I said, the two key things when creating a virtual machine is, one, just check the region to see where the most cost-effective area is for yourself and what is local to you. As I said, there are cheaper servers in America, but I'd like to have the local servers in Europe, and for me, North Europe works. Second thing is, obviously, once you've got your region and you're selecting an image, make sure that you've checked the sizing guide and the requirements for that particular application that you're evaluating or testing, etc. And make sure that you don't really go overkill and overboard and pick one of these 2016 servers with 128 gig of disk space as default. The small disk ones, 30 gig, usually suffice for the most part. And then again, check the sizing guide just to see what type of virtual machine you need. Now the beauty of it is, when you do power down and you shut things down and put things to a stop, you can keep the size is irrelevant. That's not going to occur any costs. That's only when it's up and running. So that's beautiful, because when it comes to checking things, if you need to ramp things up or ramp things down, then you can do so, and it's only going to be when it's actually running that it's going to consume usage charges. And then the same with the image. Again, if you're going to have a 128 gig disk drive versus a 30 gig disk drive, there is a difference in cost. So as I say, it is imperative and it is important to choose the right one. If you don't know at the time, I say start with the small disk, because you can go up in size if you need to at a later date. You can't go down, but you can go up. So pick the small disk, and then when you've got it sitting at rest, then you can also reduce costs even more, and I'll show you that in a moment. Let me complete the administrator account. So your local administrator to connect to that device. Now obviously you want to have a strong password, so if you create a complex one, just make it a bit more difficult for anybody that's trying to hack or mess in. But you probably, as I say, as a test server, not so important, but nevertheless keep in best practice and have a strong password. There's these various ports I can open up. I probably only need RDP for this, but for the sake of my demonstration, I'll just load them all up and click on next. So cost savings. So I mentioned there that we can reduce costs further. So what I would usually say is, when you're running the machine and you've got it up and you want things to happen fast, you've got 3 different disk types. You've got your premium solid state drive, so your creme de la creme. then you've got your standard solid state drive, and then you've got a standard hard disk drive. So usually when I'm doing my testing, you can actually change these. So I always have it in the premium solid state drive just for speedness. But then when I power it down and I know I'm not going to use that test server for a month, 2 months, then there's no point in, for the 30 gig, I think it's roughly about £4 a month if you've got it at the premium solid state drive. But there's no need for that for me, so I might as well drop it down to the standard hard disk drive. And then when I've got it powered down, that's costing me probably about £1.14 a month. I think it's about 3-4 pence a day for that one, versus sort of 15 pence a day for your premium. So as I said, don't incur additional costs if you don't need to. Just blow it up and down as and when needed. Okay, networking. So when we create our virtual machine, it's going to ask us about the virtual network. Now, it will create a new one from default, or we can link to an existing one. So for the first time when you're creating the virtual machine, you might as well allow it to create the default My Test virtual network. And then when I create my second machine, it's important that I connect it to the same virtual network. Okay, so there's all the standard stuff, all looking good. Click on next. So this is the management side there, you know, how I want to monitor it, your diagnostic storage account, automatically shut down. Again, I'm just going to keep the defaults here. I could just go straight to review and create, but we'll go through these various pages just so you can have a bit of an idea what they look like. Next page is advanced. So you've got other things that you can do here. So if you wanted to add some extensions to your server, to your machine post deployment, just to add some value to it, then you could do so. Some of them are chargeable, some are not. So it could be things to do with virus protection, etc., etc. Next page, you've got tags. So if you wanted to categorize things and keep things associated, so you wanted to look at things for billing purposes, etc., then you can create a number of tags and have them linked that way. And then the final page, review and create. What that's going to do, it's going to check everything I've configured and it's going to validate it. If there's any issues, then it will pipe up here. Otherwise, we should have a successful validation and a summary page to check. So as we can see, we're just going through a validation process, just taking a little bit longer there. But there we are, running the final validation, and it has passed. So the first thing it's doing there is it's just giving us some idea of the costs, some terms to agree to, and then a summary of the configuration that we have just set. So that's all looking good. I'm going to click on create, and at this point what it's going to do now is it's going to deploy that machine onto the Azure platform and provision that server for me. So there's a number of resources it's going to create. I think there's about 7 in total by default, including obviously the virtual network and the machine itself. So I'm going to click pause at this stage so it can continue that deployment, and this takes anywhere between 3 and 7 minutes usually for what I'm creating. This one might take about 5 minutes for the first time, but my second one might only take about 3 minutes because I'll have the virtual network all created. So I'm going to click on pause and I will see you again once that has completed. Okay, so the deployment is now complete. It took circa 3.5 minutes, so nice and quick. Gone are those days where you would have to set up your virtual or your physical machine, sorry, and have to create the operating system and load it in and install it. And I'll say it's done wonders for my health. No more long waits with tea and biscuits. As I said, within a few minutes, it's all set up and ready to go. So absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to click on go to resource here. Now, there's a couple of things that I need to do at the console level, so within the Azure portal, before I go actually into the server itself to do some configuration. So the first thing we need to do is we need to change it from a dynamic IP to a static one. So that is quite key here. And the way we do that is we click on networking in the settings of that machine. Click on the network interface. And then from the network interface, we go into the IP configurations. click on the name, and as you can see, we have got the private IP settings, and it's currently assigned to be dynamic. So we need to change that to static. And as you can see, I've got a static IP address. Now this is really important to be actually doing it at this level. Being old school, I remember when we used to set the domain controllers, and we used to put the static IP addresses. We used to do that obviously within the operating system. So I did that for the very first time in Azure, and then when I actually tried to get back into the machine, I was no longer able to do so. So it is important and imperative that we actually set the static arrangement at the portal level within Azure, within that console, not into the actual server itself. So that's the first thing to take into account that we need to do. If you don't do this, then it's going to cause you major headaches. The next thing we need to do then is we need to go to the actual virtual network. If we go into this network card and just let it know about that IP address. So here's my network card. So I'm going to click on my tests. Now here it's giving me an overview, and the first thing it's going to show me is connected devices. So we can see here my my device here, and if I click on my DC and click on here and go to DNS servers, this is where we do not add it. If we do that, then this whole process is not going to work. I mean, we can change it at a later date, but if we want to get it right first time, we need to make sure that we don't go into that part. So again, let me just show you virtual networks. Let's click on the actual name of the virtual network. Now the overview screen is going to go into connected devices. If we clicked on connected devices there, that's where it's taking us on that overview screen. So do not make that mistake. As we get more and more devices within this network, they will all pop up here. So as I said, important that we do not do it here. We need to click on the settings, DNS servers, and then within the DNS servers, we click on custom, and we're going to add that machine name. So let me just remind you where that is. So we go to virtual machines. Here's my DC, and we've got a public IP address, but importantly, we need the private IP address, this 10.0.3.4. Okay, so now I've added that server to the DNS servers for my virtual network. If I was having high availability, then obviously I could add another one. But as I say, this is my test network. I don't need to be too complex. I just need to simplify it and keep everything easy. Okay, so that has been added. So as I said, the two key things once you've created your virtual machine is one, and we'll just go through it again. We go to the name of the machine. In this case, it's called my DC. We go into the network settings, or the networking settings. We click on the network interface. Go to the IP configurations. Click on the name. And then we change the assignment from dynamic to static. And then we just use, as I said, that IP address that was given, 10.0.3.4. That's the first thing we need to do. The second thing we do is we go to virtual networks. We click on the virtual network name. We don't click on the device here in the connected devices, or within connected devices, we have to go down to DNS servers in the settings. Change it from default to custom, and then we give that server IP address here. So that's the two important things we do at this stage on this level. Now we have done that, we can go into the machine itself and do the rest of the configuration in order to make that domain controller. So I'm going to click on the virtual machine. Got a series of options here on the controls, and we're going to click on connect, download RDP file. Okay, we'll click on connect, enter the credentials. So I'm going to put in that administrator that we created. So here's my local administrator. Click on OK and yes. And now that's going to load up that machine. It's going to put in some sort of personal settings and set up the profile for that. So while that's underway, I'm going to click on pause and just allow that to get up to speed. Okay, the profile has now been set up. So I'm on the server manager screen, and also I have the little network pop-up that's asking me if I want this PC to be discoverable. Well, create the domain, so why not? I'll just click on yes. And that moves that out of the way, and we have the server manager screen. So next step is to configure this local server. Now you can see I've got a whole host of options here on these properties. So if you want to change things like the time zone, again, if you want to go into different configurations for date time settings, all that can be configured. I'm going to keep everything default at this moment in time, so I'm not going to go too crazy. The main objective here now is to set the roles up and the various features, because I want to make this my domain controller. So what I will do though is I'm just going to take off the enhanced security, click on off and off. There we go. And that's the only configuration I'm going to do on this screen. So the objective is to move it out of this work group and create a domain controller. The way we do that is we can go into manage in the top right corner and click on add roles and features, which is going to open up another wizard for us. Again, I'm going to keep most of these defaults here. Just keep it simple for my test environment. Again, the operative word being test. Only one server to select from this pool. And this is the key part here, what we need to set up. So it's asking for the various server roles, and what I want to do here is I want to create an active directory domain service. So if I click on that, it's going to let me know all the other stuff that needs to be installed, so the various features in order to make that happen. So we've clicked on the ADDS, click on next, and then we've got further features that we can enable. Again, I'm just keeping this default. Click on next. We'll go next again. And I don't want it to restart because there's some more configuration that I'm going to do after. And then we click on install, and then these various Windows features are going to be added to this server. And I'm just going to give that a moment to continue. It takes a few minutes, so we'll click on pause, and when that has completed, we will go to the next step. Okay, once that's completed, I can just close out that window, and now I have the exclamation mark pop up for a notification for post deployment configuration. Now this is the part now where we promote this server to a domain controller, and we just simply click on this link, and again we're going to get another wizard in order to set this up. So first thing you do is you get 3 options about the deployment operation. Now as this is a new domain, I'm just going to click on add a new forest, and we will call this mytests.test.com, whatever you want to call it, but we will just call it mytest.test. So that's my domain name by the root. Click on next, and then again I'm just going to keep all of these defaults. It's going to need a password in case there's a restore required at a later date. So add that in quickly. And click on next again. So that's just verifying that, and then it will return a net BIOS, and hopefully, as I say, that has been used before. Otherwise we're going to get sort of 1, 2, etc, etc, but no, it's returned that. So my test is the net BIOS name for this domain. Next, again, going to keep all of the defaults. These paths are, if you're going to create logs, for example, and you want to put them on a different drive, then you can do so. So as I say, we're just going to keep everything at a default. There's your summary. Click on next, and then it's going to go through a verification process just to see any kind of requisites, and before installation you'll probably get a few warnings pop up if you want to sort of do some changes for best practice purposes. But again, as I said, there's only just a series of warnings, and I'm just going to click on next to that because I'm just, as I say, just creating a test environment. Just need to keep it simple. So I'm going to click on click the install and kick that off. Again, that's going to take a few minutes, and then once that's completed, it's probably going to perform the reboot. So I will click on pause and allow that installation to complete before we go to the next stage. So the installation now has completed, and as part of that it does a restart. So again, I'll just pause that and allow the restart to take place, and then we will log back into the system. Okay, so that server is now rebooted. I'm back at the credentials to log in via RDP. So I'm not going to log in as the local administrator, so I'm going to change that now so we log in as the domain administrator. You just put in the username, password, click on OK. And then we should get a connection to the server. Click yes to that, and then that should load up the remote desktop. Again, as we're now logging on as the domain administrator, it's going to set up the profile, and this will take a few minutes, so I'll just let that complete. So now that profile has loaded. Just going to click on local server, and as you can see, it's moved now from the work group to the domain mytest.test. So as far as that's concerned, we've set up our domain controller, and all we need to do now is create another machine, or 2 or 3 or as many as you wish, and connect it to that domain. So we can leave that, go back into the virtual machines, and I'm going to click on add a virtual machine. So we're pretty much replicating the process that we've done earlier, but there's just a few things that we need to consider at this stage. So first thing is let's join it to the same resource group. So then when it comes to billing and management of the costs, we've got them all within that same container. Give it the machine name, so we'll call it my server. Again, I'm going to use the North Europe region as the most cost effective, no availability. Then I'm going to browse the marketplace. Again, I'll pick a 2016 server. Change the size of the VM. Again, we'll just use the B2S. Just select as 4 ports. Now I'm going to click on next. Again, I'm going to keep the premium solid state drive. And the important bit here is when we go to the networking, we want to ensure that we connect it to the same virtual network. So you can see there's a list of networks there. So we don't want a new one. We just want to make sure that whatever domain controller it's going to and the domain it's going to join, it needs to be in the same virtual network. So we'll keep it as my tests. There's the subnet all set up. We don't need to do anything but keep the defaults. And then we'll go to review and create. Allow that validation to take place. It's passed. Click on create, and then I'm going to pause this while it takes 3 to 5 minutes to provision this new server on the Azure platform. Okay, so that deployment has now completed. It just took about 3 minutes, so we can go to the resource. Now, unlike the first time round where we were setting up the domain controller and we had to go into some additional configurations for the networking, we don't have to do anything like that. We can just simply click on connect, download the file. We log in as a local administrator, so obviously the username and password we set during the initial configuration. Okay, I'm going to allow that to load up, so it's just going to take a couple of minutes just to set the profile. When that profile is completed, we will get to the final stage. Okay, the profile is now loaded. We can click on yes to allow it to be discoverable by the network, and then we will go to the local server settings, and then from here this is where we configure it to join the domain. So at the moment you can see it's currently connected to its own workgroup. So we'll click on the link and then click on change, and then when we click on change it's going to open up a window and ask us where we want this to join. So at this stage I'm going to click and get it to join the my test domain. My test dot test. You can see it's low memory, no issues there. Obviously, as I said, you can just beef this up and down as you need. Okay, so now at this stage I now need to use the domain name administrator. So first of all we'll put in the domain name, the associated passwords to that account. Click on OK. And if I've typed that in correctly, it's going to welcome me to the domain, and then I think I'm going to have to do a reboot. There we go. Welcome to the mytest.test domain. Click on OK. Go through the restart process. And then while that's going through a reboot, I'm going to pause, and then we'll look at the last stage of this demonstration tutorial video. Okay, so it's now done a reboot. I'm not going to log on with the local administrator, but this time I'm going to change and log on as the domain name administrator. So to see how we get on. Okay, so while this is in the process of creating the profile, again I'm going to pause it, and then once that's completed we'll just look at the local server configuration, confirm it's connected to the network. Okay, so the profile has been updated now. So I've just logged onto that server as the domain administrator. I'll just click on local server, and as you can see, my SVR is now part of the MyTests domain. So that has been a successful implementation. I can just jump out and just show you a couple of things. So if I go back into my domain controller and we go into Active Directory users and computers, again this is where we can start setting up a number of users just for test purposes, but we can also see within computers there is the server that's connected, so all good there. And finally, if I minimize this and we go to the virtual networks and click on the MyTest resource, you will see on the overview page we now have those two devices connected. So as I mentioned, it is imperative in the early stages when you first configure that you don't actually click on these devices and then go to the DNS servers and click on custom. It needs to be done at the settings of the virtual network itself. So there you go. That's just a quick tutorial to show you how you can set up your test environment with a couple of machines. Obviously you can create as many as you wish using that same process for the second part of the video. Hope it's been useful for you. Hope it allows you to create, as I say, a cost-effective test domain. As I said, the final sort of things to do when you are powering and it isn't in operation is when you shut it down, just ensure that when you go to virtual machines that it's stopped and deallocated. So when you've got it running, when you shut down, it doesn't stop it completely. What you have to do is you have to click in here and click on stop as well. If you stop here, that's going to stop the actual machine completely. It's going to release the IP address again, so the IP also occurs a small charge if you keep that running. And then the final thing it's going to have to do there is when you go to your disks and you click on the actual disk itself, you can see premium solid state drive. Don't think I'm going to be able to do it at this stage while it's still in operation, but you can go to the configuration when it is completely stopped, and you can change the account from a solid state drive to a hard disk drive. So when it's not in use, it's only consuming 4p a day at the time of recording this video, and then when you're ready to use, just change the configuration back up to a solid state drive and boot it up with whatever virtual machine size you wish. There we go. That's all I really wanted to show you. Hope it's been useful. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.